And hello, everybody. Welcome to Coffee, Kegs, and Kriegsspiel. I am your host, Marshall. Let me get patched in here. I forgot one essential thing, right? Which is how I hear if anyone comes on to talk. But today we're going to be talking about being prepared, right? That's a joke. We're going to talk about some tips for playing Kriegsspiel, but before I get into that, a quick commercial advertisement. Make sure that you like and follow our page on YouTube, and also please support us here, Coffee, Kegs, and Kriegsspiel, the podcast that I do every Sunday at 9 a.m. religiously. Just help us out because we could use it. And I appreciate it. And you got a couple tier options here, and that ensures that this podcast keeps coming to you and allows us to do more. Like yesterday, we live streamed a battle here to our patrons, and I hope that you folks enjoyed that experience if you watched it. If you missed it, you can watch it on our YouTube, but I do occasionally have stuff that's exclusive just for the patrons, and it's worth it. So there you have it. Let's close that out. Today we're going to talk about some tips for Kriegsspiel, and if you have questions or comments, understand that you're welcome to chime in. I do want to kind of run through the material that I prepared, but you can always raise your hand and ask to speak on the stage. You can also post questions on the live chat in YouTube. I'll be monitoring both of those as best I can so that I can field your questions as they arise. Let's see here. Okay, so the first thing we're going to talk about in Kriegsspiel is writing orders. Remember here, this is not advice for, actually running a military campaign or something. We're playing Kriegsspiel as a game. We're not really using it as a military training exercise, which is the original purpose of it. Nonetheless, it still has value for that, but remember that we're playing it as a game. And playing it as a game, some considerations are probably a little bit different than it might be, let's say, if the military were running it as a training exercise. Just keep that in the back of your mind. Kriegsspiel is fundamentally an exercise about writing orders, because that's really what it comes down to. If you write poor orders, or if there's a breakdown in communication, then it doesn't matter. You can have the best plan in the world, and that plan's going to go to pieces if you or one of your subordinates cannot write clear and effective orders or communications. Fortunately, as a game, we have a lot of wiggle room. We have a lot of leeway. It's not so strict. And in fact, when we play, we often allow players to just give verbal orders. But there are going to be times when you're going to write orders or write dispatches or communications. And so there are some rules that you need to keep in mind when you're doing that. Okay, let me just pull up some red ink here so that I can write just a little bit here. I'll write some notes right here. Let's see here. Okay, on your orders, the first and foremost, the important thing is you want to talk about to. You need to say who your dispatch is going to. You need to put that on every single dispatch. You need to have from, right? Just like a Christmas present, to and from, right? If you want that dispatch to get to where you want to go, you have to put to and you have to put from so that the recipient knows who is sending it. I don't know how many times I've delivered a dispatch or received a dispatch and there's no from, and I am sitting here guessing who sent this to me. Okay, the next thing is the time. Time is important because we do track dispatches typically, especially if they're traveling across the map. And if that happens, it happens that dispatches can fall out of sync. In other words, you can send one dispatch number 1, and then you can send dispatch number 2 on the next turn or so. And sometimes dispatch 2 will arrive before dispatch 1. It has happened before, and it can happen. And if you don't have the time on there, the commander is going to get all turned around, and that's a huge problem. So you always want to make sure you have to, from, time. And here's another one that's really important, is your location. Okay, you need to put your location. I'm just going to put loc there because I don't want to spell out location and bog down. But put location because, if you're here in Ogni, for example, and you send a dispatch to Faye, and you don't tell the person that you're in Ogni, for as far as they're concerned, you could be in any area up here. They're guessing. They don't know where you're at. We have played games where you have to list the recipient's location. Okay, so that's another level that we often or sometimes do. And the dispatch will religiously travel to that particular location first. And if you're not there, then the courier hunts around and looks for you, and hopefully you have forces or somebody there to direct them. They went up to St. Blaise. Okay, let's just trot, and go up there. And then the dispatch gets delivered. I really love playing that way. It's more realistic. The only downside is it's time consuming. But definitely make sure that you put to, from, time, your location, and I would like to say the recipient's location, but that is going to be on a per game basis. On a fast-moving open Saturday that's being played casually, we're generally not going to make you do that. But in play-by-posts or other games, yeah, the umpires are probably going to make you say, where do you want that message to travel? And they're going to make you, they're going to hold you to it. All right, I'm going to turn my face off here just so we're not blocking so much of the map. All right. Communicate your message clearly and succinctly. I can't tell you this too much. You really do need to communicate a clear message. Your words have meaning. Read it back to yourself. Read it back to yourself out loud if you have to. Understand and make sure that your subordinates are going to interpret the message clearly. This is a grammar thing, and I know that we have a lot of people in the IKS who don't speak English as a first language. And I will tell you that 6 times out of 10, the non-native English speakers compose better, more clear dispatches than the people who speak English natively. What's going on with that, guys? You've got to communicate very clearly. I also want to say that we are the International Kriegsspiel Society. So if, for example, you and your subordinates speak German or Finnish or Russian or Spanish, Portuguese, Italian, any other language, you name it, Chinese, it doesn't matter, even Australian. If they speak another language, it is okay for you to send a dispatch in that language. Just make sure that your umpire understands to, from, time, and location. But it is okay for you to use your native language to communicate with your fellow Kriegsspielers if they, of course, will understand in your language. Absolutely no problem with anyone doing that ever, not even online in the forums and certainly not in the games, okay? All right. Here's something you do not want to do. Do not issue a circular. I saw this yesterday. We had a commander, and I don't know who, and I'm not singling anyone out because I've seen it more than once. But somebody will send a dispatch that goes to all commands. Yesterday, the commander hit Control-V, Control-V, Control-V. They just pasted the order like 6 times. Don't do that. Don't. Just don't. It creates a lot of work for the umpires. It slows down the game, and chances are, better than even, the umpire's just going to say, I'm just not even, and they ignore it. In fact, that was happening yesterday. Umpires were getting so overwhelmed, the assistants were getting a little overwhelmed with their work, they didn't have time to deliver your mail. And now that's bad, right? You have to get your dispatches out. That's kind of the point of the exercise, right? We just talked about how Kriegsspiel is all about writing orders, and then, we're not delivering your dispatches, we're not delivering your orders. What's going on with that? However, nonetheless, if you are sending unnecessary dispatches, if you're creating traffic that doesn't need to be sent, that is a problem, and you should not expect it to get sent. It is okay for you to ask your umpire, and I had this come up, did my message get sent? Yeah. And I checked, and I found the message hadn't been sent, so I dealt with it. But generally speaking, you can ask if your message arrived or not. You don't get to know that. But you can reasonably ask if your message got sent. So if you think your dispatches are not going out, just nudge your umpire, ask about it. That's fine. I find that to be reasonable. But don't send unnecessary communications. Don't send a dispatch because you're bored. And certainly don't issue a circular unless You are a commander-in-chief, and you have a reason to do it. For example, you're ordering the army to fall back to a reserve position. So I've got my army. My army's up here in these lines, and the army is about to be broken, and I want them to fall back to a reserve position here. I will issue a circular, which is an order to all commands that they need to fall back. That's reasonable, but don't do it otherwise, okay? You know, oh, I saw the enemy over here. No, not everybody needs to know that. Who should you be communicating with? You should be communicating with your neighboring commands and, of course, with your superior. Also, any subordinates. But a person who is 2 or 3 commands over from you, who is on your level, but they're not neighbors with you on the battlefield or something, you probably don't need to be bogging things down, communicating with them. You certainly don't want to be engaging in banter. Look, I love a good joke. I love smack talk. I love banter. But no, in the course of a fast-moving live game, I wouldn't do it, okay? Here's a quiz for you. Should I notify my commander? The answer is yes. If you have to ask that question, the answer is always yes. Notify your commander. All right, let's take a quick look here. Let's see here. Otto Wolfton says something is too complicated. Probably, I would hope they're agreeing that some of these dispatches are a bit much. If you think that to from location such are complicated, I'm sorry, but that's kind of the minimum. You know, you just have to do it. It's the game, and it's the exercise. Otto says, I don't think writing the assumed location of the recipient slows the game down. It's something that me and my assistant umpires include every game. And I like that. And I do think games should be played that way. Of course, you do have to consider assistant umpire numbers and experience levels. But if you can do it, I like it, and I think it should be played that way. Otto says, same with sending a lot of dispatches. It doesn't seem to slow the game down that much. The umpire just has to control V. Most often players send relatively few dispatches to each other anyways. And I'm going to say it depends. Sometimes you do have players who are very verbose. Other times you have, and I'll agree with Otto on this level. You do get players who never send dispatches, or they rarely send dispatches, and that's a big problem too. I don't want to bog down on this, though. I want to move to the next one. So I largely agree. Just the experience Otto sometimes has and I have is sometimes different. And again, it depends on the team of umpires that you have working. I think that's essential. Wolfton says, I personally use a system of 4 W's: who, what, when, and where. And I think that's good. It's good to have a system like that. That's reasonable. All right, let's talk about some other stuff. Let's talk about scouting. You need to scout always. If you're not scouting, then you're playing with your eyes closed, and I wish you good luck. Okay? You might as well be playing Marco Polo, but nobody responds polo, right? You're just blinding, groping your way in the dark. It's a great way to stub your toes at best, right? You have to scout. If you do not have scouts, let's say you have a pure infantry command, or you're commanding artillery or something, team up with somebody who does, work with somebody who does, or make sure that you are not on the leading edge of your force. You know, you want to be number 2 or 3 in a column then, if you're not going to be scouting, because otherwise you're groping blindly and you're just asking to get smashed. When scouting, send a report immediately. Sometimes, even if you see nothing, there's nothing here, report to your commander, I see nothing. Because that's information that your commander can use. So you get up here, you get here to Castle Grossier, and you're looking over to Preyo and Agni, and you see no enemy. Send a dispatch to your commander. Hey, I've arrived at my location. I see nothing. That's a good scouting report. That's worthwhile. That's your purpose. That's the point. Fun fact, that's the purpose of scouting. Maintain contact with the enemy when you do make contact, though. So when you're up here and you're out here and you're doing, scouting things, so we'll put you here and we'll put the enemy here, and now you suddenly see the enemy. Well, maintain contact. Now, if they advance, fall back. It's not your job to do combat with them. You're not there to fight. Do not engage unless absolutely necessary, and reinforcements are inbound. So if you have a supporting column that's moving up this way, then okay, maybe you will hold here and fin them off or something. But generally, that's not your purpose. Your eyes, not fists. So understand that if an eye gets in a conflict with a fist, the eye is going to lose every time. So you don't want to block with your eye. You let the fist come up and block, okay? Do fist to fist, not eye to eye, and definitely not fist to eye, if that makes a little sense to you. One of my dogs is going crazy. Anyway, if the enemy falls back, follow them and maintain contact. Follow them and maintain contact. That's the purpose. Don't let them out of your sight. Notify your superior. If you have subordinates, you may notify them. You might also notify your neighbors. But again, you're not going to send a circular. Okay? All right, let's erase all the drawn lines. Let's talk about cavalry. First and foremost, I want to say that understand that not all cavalry is Napoleonic, and they cannot always fight well. And I'm about to spew some really broad generalizations at you that do not always hold up. So it's appropriate to ask your umpire, what kind of cavalry is this? What are their attributes? What do I need to know about them? How are they best used? And so on. Do not assume, and understand that there are going to be times when you know more about this subject than the Empire does. There really will. It'll happen. The Empire's carefully constructed this scenario, and they're going to have you out there running around with cuirassiers, and you're going to know more about cuirassiers in that time period than the Empire does. You're going to be right. Unfortunately, you have to ask the umpires still, what are the capabilities? What's the equipment of this force? Whatever. I think that's a reasonable question to ask. And the reason is the Empire might be ignorant. Right here. Okay? And if that's the case, you don't want to be running around assuming you have a capability when you do not at all. Anyway, I'll give you some quick generalizations, but understand these are generalizations. Based on the system that I use, the K-22 system, you have hussars. These are light, fast cavalry. They're guys just armed with sabers. They're okay in a charge, especially against artillery or unprepared infantry. You have here lancers. These are guys with lances. They're fast, they're light, they're great with a charge. Here you have dragoons. They're fast, light, good for holding something for a short time because they're armed with muskets usually. They're great on the flanks, but they are poor with the charge. Don't go charging with dragoons. Cuirassiers, they're slow, heavily, excellent with the charge, poor for holding something though. Use them as a shock force. There are cuirassiers and types that are like dragoons and that they have muskets and stuff. It just depends. You have to ask, okay? And again, these are generalizations. American Civil War cavalry typically is very fast, very good for scouting, capable of holding for a short time. They're excellent on flanks, poor in charges. The bottom line is ask. Ask and try to be sure, rather than assuming, because the umpires will have one thing in mind, you'll have another thing in mind, and the next thing you know, you're in trouble and you don't know why. It's okay to ask. All right, let's talk about artillery. And artillery is one of the big things I see being misused all the time. And one of my big pet peeves is artillery that is put at the tail end of a column. I kid you not, you guys will have a column, and that column will be marching along, here, okay? And you'll have a battery of guns, and we'll just set it up, and this is what your column looks like. Okay, well, that's okay, I suppose, if you're not expecting contact with the enemy. But then, here you are, you'll run into the enemy, and the enemy will be defending, right here, and you want artillery, and you don't have artillery. You have to send all the way back. Hey, bring up the artillery. Oh, okay. And it takes a ridiculously long time. And then it comes here, and then finally it goes online, and it fires 15, 30 minutes later, whatever. No, don't do that to yourself. Put your cavalry at the head of the column, or even better, as the second or third element in your column. This is how I typically do my deployments. My artillery is like the second element, because when I run into these guys, I'm not going to expect them to stand there and wait. Hey guys, can you wait like 20 minutes? I'm bringing up guns from the rear. No, I want these guys to move. I want these guys to deploy, go online, and take them under fire immediately. Start smashing. Let's do this. Let's get through there. Okay? You don't have time otherwise. You want that cavalry, you want that artillery up front if you expect contact with the enemy. You have the tool. You want to be able to reach into the tool chest and use it. Other things. Knock off the counter battery fire. You guys love counter battery fire. Okay, I want to order counter battery fire. Well, that's cute and all, but that's not the purpose of your artillery. The purpose of the artillery should be to fire on enemy maneuver elements. So essentially, you batter enemy formations. Hit these guys. This should be your target. If you have to choose between this and this, your target had better be this. Because this is what's going to kick your butt eventually. These are the guys who are going to come in and seize everything. Artillery can't seize anything. They can't attack. They can fire, they can run out of ammunition, and then they can stand there and look pretty. But these are the guys who, even if they run out of ammunition, they've got bayonets. They can come up, they can move quickly, they can maneuver a lot faster. These are the threat. Fortunately, they tend to be densely packed, especially in your Napoleonic battles. You need to be firing on these guys, not these guys. I know that counter battery seems fun. It's cute, but it should be your second preference. So, when do you do counter battery? Number one, if there's no better targets. Number two, if you significantly outnumber enemy artillery that are presently in the duel. Like, you might have the bigger artillery force, but if you're evenly matched in a duel, you don't want to do counter battery. You're just asking to lose. You're going to roll dice. Who wants to roll dice? You know, you want to win, don't you? Or you have a significant bonus to accuracy. Let's say, you know, these are 3-inch ordnance rifles, and they are accurate to like 4,000 yards. Oh, well, yeah, I might do counter battery in that case. But unless, you know, there's no better target, I would always do the maneuver elements of the enemy, do the infantry, the enemy formations, rather than the artillery. Okay, let's talk about some infantry rules. And I am trying to hasten things a bit because we're low on time and I can't stay after school today to go over this. I got stuff going on. But we can continue the discussion in chat later. Let's talk about infantry, though. Number one thing I don't see players doing, pet peeve, keep reserves. You need to have reserves. So let's say you've got, 3 brigades or 3 battalions, whatever. Keep one in reserve. So deploy one online, deploy another one online if you feel you need to, but do not deploy all of them online. When you do this, you simply make a nice long thin line that the enemy can just punch through. And then, of course, these guys just rout. They run away because their center got punched through, whatever. Instead, put them in reserve. Why? Because one of these is going to break. That's just the odds of the dice. That's the game. And it's probably real life, too. There are occasions where these guys are here. Maybe there's a flanking force. Maybe they are taking artillery fire. That's just how most Kriegsspiel systems work. And it's probably how real life worked as well, because Kriegsspiel tends to model real life pretty well. You want to be able to plug in reinforcements. Otherwise, you're going to sit there with a gap in your line, or your line's just going to get rolled up. So have reinforcements. Number 2, rally broken troops. If you get reports that your troops are broken, rally them. Go over to them and say to the umpire, I'm going to rally these troops. And say that every turn. I will try to rally these troops. I will send an aide to rally these troops. I want to rally these troops. Every turn, tell the umpire, I'm trying to rally the troops. Sometimes they will let you do it. Sometimes they will not. It depends on the system. It depends on the umpire. But you do want to try to rally troops whenever you can. Next thing, if there are cavalry in the area, you have spotted cavalry, you'd better get in a square. Understand that squares your defense against cavalry, and if you see threatening cavalry at all, if there's a possibility that cavalry could charge you, especially if they are lancers or cuirassiers, squares. You want to do squares if you can. So don't forget to order squares. We sometimes will say, squares will automatically form and such, but it doesn't hurt to issue the order to your umpire. Hey, make sure these guys go into square. Otherwise the umpire may forget that step. They may not think about it, or they may say, well, you didn't order it, and then boom, next thing you know, you're getting charged. So squares are excellent defense. Use them. Don't be afraid to order them. It's okay. You order them for a reason, and that's because they are the best antidote to cavalry that you have in most Kriegsspiel games. Here's another thing. Stop charging all the time. Knock that off. That wasn't done a whole lot. It wasn't a preferred tactic. It is a weak tactic. I know in K22 it's always punished. If you charge, you're going to take a loss guaranteed. You might still win the charge, but you're going to take a loss. Your troops will be disordered. They're done for the day. Do not be ordering charges. Knock it off. So that's an important thing. And the other thing is have support. Have some support from subordinates and other people around you. If your formation is too small to keep a reserve, you can't put a block behind or whatever, then have somebody support you. Don't go off on your own. You're not Maverick, okay? You're not an ace. You're not going to shoot down MiGs here. Have support. Unless the enemy's really tiny and you think you have overwhelming force and you can defeat him in detail, do not. You need to have support, okay? All right, some other things before we finish up. Terrain. Pay attention to the terrain. Use it for more than walking on. A lot of umpires have this nasty habit of ignoring terrain. They let troops move lightning speed. They move at the same speed across open ground as they move across here up this hill. That's a problem, and it's an umpire issue. Umpires need to pay attention to that, but you as a player also need to pay attention to that. You need to understand that when you are going up this hill, you are going to move slower than when you're moving across this ground. Even if you're on a trail, you're going to move slower than going cross-country on open ground, almost always. So keep that in mind. Understand your movement rate. I also understand that sometimes umpires will not factor in movement rate because it's easy for them to just count squares or measure with a stick and say, oh, well, here's how far they went, whatever. This thing is a little wonky, so I'm not going to mess with it. Yeah, pay attention to that. Be ready with your orders when the umpire pops in. Understand that screenshots are great. I am a big proponent of just sending my umpire a screenshot. Hey, umpire, I want to do this. I want to deploy like that right now. Okay, so you can tell the umpire, hey, I want to deploy in line to my left. And then you may get what you ordered, but you might get something else. You might get this, but you also might just get this. And why do you want to take that risk? Attaching a screenshot with your order helps the umpire. In fact, the guys at Army University tell me they practically beg their players to give them pictures. Draw me a picture. Because that way we don't have to worry about grammar or communication skills. We just see it and we know, hey, this is what I want you to do. This is a great way to do it, okay? Especially in a game that's moving fast. Don't ask questions unless absolutely necessary. Unless you are entirely baffled, don't stop to ask questions. So when I say entirely baffled, that means I can't give an order unless I have this fundamental question answered. That's okay. But it is not a time to know about the scenario or know how to play the game or to ask a question about mechanics or whatever. No, you need to be ready with your orders. Don't ask a question unless it's absolutely necessary. And if you can, it's also okay to private message your fellow players about a mechanics question or a gameplay question. You can't ask about things that are actually happening in the Kriegsspiel. But if you forget something about the scenario, I really don't mind you chatting your fellow players about that. Because the way I see that is you would still have a command staff, and if you forgot something or you have a question, well, one of your subordinates, an aide-de-camp, could answer it. The adjutant could answer it, whatever. That's fine. That's not entirely unreasonable. Some other stuff. Two more things. Number one, do something instead of nothing. If you've got enemy and the enemy's making moves and you're just standing there, well, that's probably going to be a problem for you because the enemy is reacting to your disposition and they are probably trying to outmaneuver you or harm you in some way. And if you stand there, you're just letting them do it. Sometimes it's better to do something rather than just stand there. Even if it's to attack or to feint or move in a certain direction, it is often better to do something rather than nothing. Okay, so keep that in mind. And one more thing is choose a course of action and stick to it. Sometimes you have these games where players are changing their orders every single turn. Knock that off. The umpires hate it, and you're going to end up punishing yourself for doing that. Unless new information comes available that's strong enough to invalidate your plan, stick to your plan. You made a plan. It's a good plan. Stick to your plan. Don't change it because you're bored or you're afraid of something. That's a big thing. People let the fear get to them. They let the fog of war get to them in Kriegsspiel, and they invalidate their own plans. Don't do that. Okay, that's all I have for tips there, and we are out of time, but let me save the stock real quick. Okay, and take a quick look at a couple of comments, and then I've got to wrap up and go. Otto says, I'm not going to read all the comments, I don't have time, but Otto says putting artillery in the end of the column really makes sense in my eyes. Heavy artillery and their carriages are much more prone to being slowed down by bad condition roads than infantry. Okay, I get that, but again, I really think having this resource on hand is a lot better than having it at the tail end of your column. What are you going to do? Write a letter and, hope they reply? No, you want them at the head of the column. And I am that's one where I'm just going to disagree. Let's see here. Order delays. There's a discussion on order delays, which is great. I think there needs to be more order delays. In fact, I know in the UK society, they have like a chart for order delays. And based on the size of your formation, the delay can be 15, 30, 45 minutes, an hour, which is a really cool way to play. But again, slower moving games. And we may need to think about ways that we can slow down some of our open Saturdays so that we can get this. I know players feel that it goes slow already because your average wait time is 15 minutes between turns. But there are some things we can do, training up some umpires, not doing meeting engagements, which I'm the number one, culprit there. I do a lot of meeting engagements, maybe getting away from those and so on. And it gives us more time to do more things like order delays. Let's see here. Okay. All right. Don't interrupt your enemy when he's making a mistake. Kristen Horn is quoting Napoleon there, and I think that's always a great thing, too. So you're right. There might be an occasion where you want to do nothing, but generally speaking, it's probably better to do something rather than stand there and let the enemy make moves against you and execute his plan upon your position while you just stood there. And, of course, don't have your hands in your pockets because, as Achilles correctly pointed out yesterday, having your hands in your pockets substantially decreases your lethality. So, there you have it. All right, guys, I've got to go. I would love to stick around and chat more, but I am on a schedule today. Feel free to post comments in general or the Coffee Kegs and Kriegsspiel chat channel. I will try to answer those and get to those throughout the day. And if people really want to go over this or you have more questions, we can do another show, another episode, even during the week. I'm happy to hop on and answer questions. I want to thank you all for being here. I want to remind you again, check us out on Patreon, patreon.com/Kriegsspiel. Support us there. We need the support. I appreciate it. And we will see you